Hello guys, Devin and Glenn here with Blazin Motorworks. This is our second episode of Fix It Yourself. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be changing the front brake pads and rotors on this car here. This is a 2002 Buick Regal GS. Throughout this episode you're going to notice that we're kind of struggling with a low lighting situation. We're having problems with our shop lights up here at the top. They're fluorescent lights, but the bulbs aren't actually coming on. The bulbs are good, so we need to chase that problem down later. So I apologize about the lighting, but hopefully we're able to work through this. For anybody who doesn't really know how to do brakes themselves, it's actually pretty simple. It's as simple as getting the one side of the car, the front tire off the ground, getting that front tire off the car, and then getting the calipers off. Once you get the calipers off, you can actually just push the brake pads out, get the rotors off, and the new ones on. The calipers on this car are held on by only 2 bolts. I've done it before, but this car's got a lot of miles on it, and the miles haven't necessarily been easy on the car or the brakes itself. So it's grinding pretty bad, and it's time that we get this taken care of. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by jacking the front of the car up and taking the tires off. We'll just fast forward some of this. I don't really want to take them all the way off.
Oh well.
Okay, so this is our caliper right here and our rotor. Here Glenn, show this rotor. This rotor is really torn up. It's really rusted. This is your caliper. Your brake pads are actually inside of it. Your caliper uses hydraulic pressure provided by your foot when you're pushing the brake pedal. Pushes fluid through these lines, actually compresses. This comes out in 2 parts. It compresses this together, creating friction between the pad and the rotor itself. And right here I have a lot of damage from where all the like road dust and salt, everything has started eating away, and also uneven wear by my brake pads caused by me not replacing these rotors the last time I replaced the brakes. And this is held on by 2 bolts. One is right here, and the other is directly beneath it on the bottom side, and this is actually what holds this entire piece onto the car. So you take these 2 bolts off, and this will actually come away from the car, and you can push the pads out by hand. So we're going to go ahead and start taking these bolts off. To check the condition of your brake pads, you can actually look through this right here, and right here's the rotor. You can follow that around, and this is actually my brake pad itself. You want to grab that brake pad box?
Yep.
And I'll go ahead and show you what the new brake pad looks like. If you're watching this video, you might actually have the new brake pads yourself. And I'm going to show you what we're actually looking at when we're looking at this here. This right here is a new brake pad. And this is the ceramic, which actually is meant to rub against the rotor, cause friction, and slow your car down. What you can see here, you can see where my finger is, there's this little line. And that's actually a separation between the rotor and this back plate for the ceramic. So my brake pad on this side is actually completely gone. Now these can be on extremely tight, especially if you take your car to like a shop or something. Sometimes they tighten things down too tight. Such as your lug nuts itself, I've run into a problem before where if you take it to somebody that's inexperienced, they'll actually use a impact to tighten them back down. They'll impact them down crazy tight, where if you have like a 4-way or you're tire iron that comes with your car from the dealership, you actually won't be able to get them off. You'll actually bend the forward, which we did, and it's the reason we have an impact now, which it's come pretty useful a lot. And unfortunately, I did these brakes myself, never thinking that I'd have to do them again. So I tightened them down crazy tight. This was quite a long time ago, when I was like, I'd say probably even before I was 18, which is quite a bit older than that now. Now, essentially speaking, your caliper should just be able to pull away from your rotor. However, these are gouged enough where there's a clear difference between this shiny part that you're looking at and this rusted part. So it's actually shaped kind of a V, and that's holding the caliper onto the rotor here. One way that you can actually help get this off is by taking a C-clamp and attaching that from your bolt here to the front. You'll actually be able to clamp this back down and push the brake fluid out of your caliper and back into your brake lines. And essentially all this is doing is relieving the pressure that your car naturally builds up. After you use your brakes, your brake pads will wear down naturally, and your car never really creates separation between your rotor and the brake pad itself. They're always together, and they have a little bit of friction to them. So whenever you hit the brakes, there's not a big gap that has to be filled. That's why this is stuck on here with just that little V that I was talking about earlier. Yeah, we still don't have, oh, we do have it enough.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing left on that.
See, this is what I was talking about. This is what it does look like, and that's what it should look like. So there's quite a difference there. And with this rotor, get this off of here. This is the rust that I was talking about earlier, and this rotor right here is just, it's not good. This inside is all torn up. These brakes have been used and abused. But these are the two bolt holes that I was talking about earlier. And as you can see, with these disc brakes, if you don't want to have to bleed your brakes, what you can actually do is you can take your C-clamp that I was talking about and compress this little cylinder back in, and that's going to allow you to get the new brake pads on and not have to re-bleed your brakes, which saves a lot of time and energy and frustration. One reason, if for no other reason, that you don't want to have to bleed your brakes is because if you have to bleed your brakes and you do it improperly, it can cause brake system failure. By brake fluid by itself will not boil, but if there's air in there, the air heats up and that will cause brake boil, and then you'll lose your brake pressure and your brakes will act like they're fading away, and eventually you'll be pushing your brake pedal closer and closer to the floor, and it'll substantially increase your stopping distance, which is something you really want to avoid. You want to be able to stop as quickly as you possibly can for emergency situations. I want to hold that.
Yeah, because you keep talking with it. We always just...
When you're pushing that caliper in, make sure that it recedes completely down, because otherwise when you go to put your new brake pads on, they're going to fit in there fine, but they're not going to fit over your rotor itself, which is going to cause issues for you when you go to reassemble your brake system. And this is the difference in the two brake rotors itself. There's just this little valley that curves up on this one, and that this one doesn't have. And this one's all coarse, and that's going to help with the friction and help stopping distance tremendously. So what we're going to do with that is we're just going to slide that on where the old one was. You slide it on like you would your wheel itself. Then you take your new brake pads.
Should be on the crate.
On the crate.
Yeah, it even comes with the
little clips. And one of them is going to have this little metal deal here that this one also had. And that's called a squeaker. It lets you know when your brake pads are getting worn down. This one obviously didn't work, but my rotors were warped, so that's caused uneven braking. As you can tell from this brake pad, it still has your line here at the top, but it's flush at the bottom. And actually this brake pad is cracked, so these brakes got really hot at some point in time. I wouldn't know what caused that.
No.
So we got the new brake pads on, the new rotor on. Last thing we have to do, dump all the rust out, which you shouldn't have. Get it seated back on to your rotor. Ouch. Bang your head a little bit. We weren't able to actually get the caliper seated all the way back down. That's kind of what I was talking about, where you're going to have some seating issues, but I'm going to go ahead and grab a rubber mallet. Make sure you don't use a hammer on it, because this is metal on metal. Not very good. You're going to end up dinging stuff up. So grab a rubber mallet and use that to tap the caliper back down to where you need it. Now we did angle this tire here, pointed it outward a little bit. This will help you get to the bolts a little bit easier. Not necessary by any means, you can do it with the tires straight, but we went ahead and turned them. So we got everything mounted back up, everything's pretty snug. We struggled a little bit to get the caliper back on, because like I said, we didn't reseed this cylinder all the way back in, so it made life a little difficult. It made everything a little bit tight. So make sure you do that. RC clamp that we have actually isn't long enough. If you could, ideally what I would like, and what I usually use when I do these disc brakes, I get a lot bigger C-clamp and actually have it where you can have it flush against the back of your caliper, and the bottom part will actually extend over, and you can push the rod through this gap right here. So all we have left to do is go ahead and put the tire back on, tighten down the lug nuts, and then move on to the other side. Okay, now we're done with that. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. It's the exact same thing that we did on this side. We're not going to make you sit through and watch that, because that's not going to be fun. And it's not going to show you anything that you didn't already know. When you start your car for the first time after you change your brake pads, make sure you sit there and you pump your brakes repeatedly a lot. Because when you separate and use your C-clamp to push your cylinder back into your caliper, what you're doing is you're creating space. And although you can push your brake pedal extremely far down, that that actually doesn't equal a whole lot of distance of travel onto your brake pads and caliper itself. So when you create that distance, if you go immediately back on the road, you're going to notice that you really don't have any brakes. And the last thing you want to do is cause an accident and harm people. So make sure that when you start the car,
You sit there and you just repeatedly pump the brakes. And that's all I really have for you guys today. If you check out our other playlist, we are still working on the Blazer. We have the motor out. We haven't got the motor torn down yet, so just stay tuned for that. You can find us if you like our videos, or if you don't want to let us know. You can actually find us on Facebook. You can find me on 2 separate Facebook pages and channels on YouTube. Blazin Motorworks, Blazin Motorworks, both on YouTube and Facebook. And you can find me on Mechanics Explained as well, and that's a YouTube channel that I don't have any videos up yet for. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. Glenn didn't help out a whole lot in this project. This girl right here is kind of my baby, so stay tuned on other episodes to see him actually do a little bit of work. And again, thank you guys for watching.